My name is Maya, 34 years old, and I am a forensic financial auditor. My husband paraded his pregnant mistress into our home on Thanksgiving, with his entire family cheering them on. They handed me a meager buyout and demanded I leave my own house. I simply signed their contract, handed over my keys, and walked away. I had no idea they were throwing a party while I was quietly redirecting my entire fortune to a Swiss bank account, leaving them to drown in a massive debt crater they built themselves. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever turned a humiliating betrayal into the ultimate victory. My job involves finding hidden money and buried secrets for major corporate clients. I spent the last 3 years building what I thought was a solid foundation for my marriage. The heavy oak front door of my Connecticut home clicked open as I turned my key. The brass handle felt cold beneath my fingertips, a stark contrast to the warmth I foolishly expected. I had just returned from a grueling week-long business trip in London. I was exhausted pulling my carry-on luggage over the threshold, looking forward to a quiet Thanksgiving evening with my husband Marcus. Instead of a quiet house, a wall of laughter and clinking glasses hit me the moment I stepped into the foyer. I dropped my bag and walked toward the dining room. The hardwood floor creaked slightly under my leather boots, but nobody noticed the sound of my arrival. There, sitting around my custom mahogany table, were 8 members of my in-law family. My mother-in-law, Brenda, my father-in-law, Richard, his sister, Tiffany, and her husband, Jamal, a flashy African-American hedge fund manager who always treated me like the hired help. But the real shock was standing at the head of the table. Marcus, my husband of 5 years, was wearing a tailored suit and holding a crystal champagne flute. His free arm was wrapped tightly around the waist of Vanessa, a 24-year-old girl whose baby bump was clearly visible under her tight silk dress. The room fell dead silent the moment they noticed me standing in the archway. Nobody looked guilty. Nobody looked ashamed. Brenda simply smiled maliciously and tapped her silver fork against her glass to break the tension. Perfect timing. Maya. Brenda announced, her voice echoing in the large room. Grab Vanessa a sparkling water from the kitchen. She is carrying the air this family has been waiting 5 years for. I stood frozen, processing the absolute sheer audacity of her command. I did not cry. I did not scream. My eyes drifted from her smug face down to the beautiful mahogany dining table. That table was not a wedding gift. I paid for it in cash with my first major consulting bonus during the 18 months Marcus spent finding himself on our living room sofa. I bought the chairs they were sitting on. I paid the mortgage on the roof over their heads. Yet they were looking at me as if I were a trespasser who had just crashed their exclusive country club dinner. Jamal leaned back in his chair, adjusting his designer tie with a look of pure arrogance. He tossed a thick legal document onto the table right next to the roast turkey. Sign the post-nuptial agreement, Maya. Jamal ordered, his voice dripping with condescension. You get $50,000 to pack your bags and leave tonight. Do not fight it. Your pathetic little spreadsheet salary cannot match the firepower of my legal team. Marcus is a rising entrepreneur now. He needs a wife who can actually build a family and match his new status. I walked slowly toward the table, feeling the collective glare of 8 people who thought they held all the power. I picked up the document. Jamal had drafted it perfectly to suit their greedy narrative. The paperwork explicitly stated that upon my signature, I surrendered any and all claims rights and access to his booming investment firm, M Capital. In their minds, they were cutting the dead weight and securing his newfound wealth for their own bloodline. They thought M Capital was his golden goose. What they failed to realize was that I never told them the truth about my job. They thought I was just a low-level data entry clerk pushing buttons. They had absolutely no idea that I was a top-tier cybersecurity architect. I built the entire digital and legal shell infrastructure for M Capital. Marcus was merely a figurehead I funded to protect his fragile male ego. I read the final clause of the post-nuptial agreement. I picked up a pen from the table. Without saying a single word, I signed my name on the dotted line. I tossed the pen down, reached into my purse, pulled out my house key, and dropped it onto the document. "I will pack my things," I said calmly. "But Jamal, you are the legal genius here. I hope you thoroughly read the original business registration filings for M Capital before drafting this." Jamal frowned, a brief flash of uncertainty crossing his face. Marcus quickly waved his hand, pulling Vanessa closer to his chest. "Ignore that failing loser," Marcus laughed, kissing Vanessa on the cheek. I turned and walked up the stairs to pack my bags. Jamal smirked, believing he had just handed me a crushing defeat. He was completely unaware that by forcing me to sign that document, he had just legally severed me from the massive explosive mountain of debt Marcus had secretly accumulated under the company name. My departure was not a retreat. It was the first calculated move in a game they did not even know they were playing. The storm was coming, and they had just willingly handed me the protective umbrella. The neon sign outside room number 12 flickered with a harsh crimson glare, casting long shadows across the faded floral bedspread. I dropped my overnight bag onto the scuffed carpet and sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. The room smelled of stale bleach and old regrets. A sharp contrast to the lavender and vanilla diffusers I kept meticulously stocked in the Beacon Hill home I had just abandoned. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket with the frantic rhythm of a swarm of angry bees. I pulled it out and watched the lock screen light up with dozens of social media notifications. Brenda had not wasted a single second. Her latest post featured a high-definition group photo centered perfectly around my custom dining table. Marcus had his arms wrapped protectively around Vanessa, while Brenda and Richard beamed with pride on either side. Tiffany and Jamal held up their champagne glasses in the background. The caption read, "Welcoming the real future of this family, so blessed to finally have a woman who knows her place and brings life into our home." Underneath the text was a string of tags, including hashtag new beginnings and hashtag out with the old. I did not shed a tear. I did not feel the familiar crushing weight of rejection that my mother-in-law had so expertly cultivated in me over the past 5 years. Instead, I felt a deep, terrifying calm settle into my bones. The screen shifted from Instagram to an incoming call. The caller ID flashed Marcus. I swiped to accept the call and brought the phone to my ear, remaining completely silent. "Maya, do not make this harder than it has to be," Marcus barked immediately. His voice was slightly slurred, undoubtedly from the vintage champagne I had purchased for our anniversary. "Jamal is finalizing the $5 million seed round tomorrow morning. My parents are liquidating their entire retirement fund to back M Capital. I need the master admin passwords for the server." In the background, I could hear Jamal shouting orders, his arrogant tone piercing through the phone speaker. "Tell her if she locks us out, I will have her arrested for corporate sabotage before sunrise." "I need the keys," Maya, Marcus demanded, lowering his voice into that patronizing tone he always used when explaining things to me. "Just hand over the admin rights to the little database you set up. You got your $50,000 payout. Take the win and walk away. Jamal is ready to move the funds the second the banks open, and we cannot afford any of your emotional delays." I balanced the phone on my shoulder and reached into my bag. I did not pull out tissues or a diary. I pulled out a heavy matte black military-grade encrypted laptop. I flipped the screen open. The display did not boot up into a colorful desktop or a basic spreadsheet application. It launched directly into a dark terminal interface filled with cascading lines of complex code and encrypted network pathways. My in-laws honestly believed I was just a glorified data entry clerk. They mocked my quiet evenings on the couch, assuming I was formatting Excel sheets for mid-level corporate managers. They had absolutely no idea that I was one of the highest-paid forensic financial auditors on the East Coast. I spent my days tracking vanished billions for global conglomerates, dismantling shell companies, and exposing corporate fraud. I had single-handedly built the entire digital and legal shell infrastructure for M Capital. Marcus was not a financial genius. He was a fragile, unemployed man with a massive ego who needed a title to impress his judgmental father. I had capitalized the firm with my own offshore consulting bonuses and coded the entire architecture to make him look like a prodigy. He was merely the figurehead riding on the back of my invisible labor. "Sure, Marcus," I said, my voice dripping with cheerful compliance. "Grab a pen. I know Jamal is breathing down your neck, and I definitely do not want to stand in the way of your massive success. I could hear him fumbling for a pen on the other end, breathing heavily into the receiver. Go ahead, he snapped. I dictated a long string of alphanumeric characters. As I spoke, my fingers flew across my mechanical keyboard with practiced precision. I was not just giving him the password. I was simultaneously accessing the back end of the M Capital mainframe through a secure backdoor I had engineered on day one. I navigated past the primary firewalls and opened the core routing directory. Got it, Marcus grunted. While he was verifying the characters with Jamal, I executed a script I had written months ago for a worst-case scenario. I called it the Sweeper Protocol. I quickly typed a new command, linking the protocol directly to the digital signature on the post-nuptial agreement Jamal had so arrogantly forced me to sign just an hour ago. Jamal thought that document protected Marcus by severing my legal ties to M Capital. Because he was a lazy, arrogant lawyer who relied on standard corporate templates, he failed to realize his incredibly broad wording actually designated all proprietary digital architecture and automated sorting mechanisms as my sole intellectual property. Are you sure this is the master key? Maya Marcus asked, his tone laced with heavy suspicion. If you are playing games with my parents' money, Jamal will destroy you. It is the master key, Marcus, I replied sweetly. You have full control now. Congratulations on the seed round. You and Vanessa deserve exactly what is coming to you. He scoffed, muttered a quick goodbye, and ended the call. I stared at my laptop screen. A small progress bar filled with green light reaching 100%. A prompt blinked on the terminal reading Sweeper Protocol armed. I leaned back against the cheap motel headboard and smiled. The connection was live. The moment Marcus logged in, he unknowingly granted my protocol absolute administrative clearance over the firm's banking application programming interface. Tomorrow morning, when Richard and Brenda wired their $5 million life savings into M Capital, the funds would not sit in Marcus's account. The automated script would immediately leverage the exact legal phrasing of Jamal's post-nuptial agreement to intercept the wire transfer. It would sweep every single cent through a labyrinth of legal loopholes straight into a highly secured numbered Swiss offshore account solely in my name. I closed the laptop with a satisfying click. Let them celebrate tonight. Tomorrow their entire empire would turn to dust and I would be the one holding the vacuum. Morning light barely pierced the grimy stained window of my motel room when heavy rhythmic pounding rattled the cheap wooden door. I had been awake for hours drinking terrible black coffee from a styrofoam cup and reviewing my offshore encrypted ledgers. The pounding grew louder, accompanied by a high-pitched, demanding voice echoing through the damp morning air. I unbolted the rusty chain and swung the door open. Vanessa stood there on the cracked concrete walkway, wearing oversized designer sunglasses and clutching a crocodile skin handbag that looked entirely too heavy for her delicate frame. Behind her, gleaming under the pale morning sun, sat my custom black Range Rover. The large tires were caked with fresh mud, and the driver's side door was left wide open, classical music spilling out from the premium sound system. Vanessa looked me up and down, her glossy lip curling in absolute disgust, at my simple gray sweatpants and oversized college sweater. She snapped her perfectly manicured fingers right in my face and demanded the spare set of keys. Marcus says this is a company car now, she sneered, leaning her weight onto one hip to aggressively emphasize her pregnant belly. Hand them over, old lady. You do not need a luxury vehicle to drive to your temp agency interviews anyway. Before I could formulate a response to her blatant disrespect, the passenger door of the Range Rover swung open. Jamal stepped out onto the littered asphalt of the motel parking lot. He was dressed impeccably as he always was, sporting a tailored navy blue suit and a vibrant silk tie he was carefully adjusting with one hand. He surveyed the rundown, depressing motel with a look of pure, unfiltered contempt before walking over with confident strides to stand directly behind Vanessa. He placed a heavy protective hand on her shoulder, playing the role of the loyal, powerful family guardian to absolute perfection. Do not make me call the local police for corporate theft. Maya Jamal warned, his deep booming voice carrying across the quiet, empty parking lot. I reviewed the M Capital ledgers late last night. Everything is accounted for. Every financial asset, every piece of hardware, and every single company vehicle is legally registered to the firm. You signed away your rights to the entire company last night. You own absolutely nothing. Do not embarrass yourself further by making this a difficult transition. Just give Vanessa the spare keys so we can get back to the office and finish preparing for the funding round. We have a very busy, highly lucrative day ahead of us, and dealing with your lingering emotional attachments is simply not on our itinerary. I looked at Jamal, his chest puffed out with arrogant certainty and false authority. He was completely convinced he had cornered a helpless, defeated woman. He honestly thought he was the smartest man in the room just because he possessed a law degree and a loud, commanding voice. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into the deep pocket of my sweatpants and pulled out the heavy silver key fob. I did not argue with his flawless logic. I did not raise my voice to defend my ownership of the car. I simply tossed the keys through the brisk morning air in a perfect arching line. They hit Jamal squarely in the chest with a sharp thud. He fumbled awkwardly for a brief second before catching them, looking genuinely shocked by my complete lack of resistance. "Keep it," I told him, keeping my facial expression entirely blank and neutral. "Just do me a massive favor, Jamal. Tell Marcus to make absolutely certain the IRS tags and commercial registrations are properly updated before he takes his shiny new girlfriend on a weekend shopping spree." Jamal narrowed his dark eyes, clearly searching for the hidden trap in my cooperative words, but his massive ego quickly overrode his legal instincts. He scoffed loudly, slipping the heavy keys into his tailored suit pocket. "Whatever you say, Maya. Enjoy your miserable new life at the bottom of the food chain." I stood silently in the doorway and watched them climb back into the plush leather seats of the Range Rover. Vanessa revved the powerful engine obnoxiously loud before tearing out of the parking lot, leaving a thick cloud of dust and gravel in her wake. The exact moment their vehicle disappeared around the corner, I closed my motel door, locked it securely, and walked straight back to my open laptop. I pulled up the State Department of Motor Vehicles portal and accessed the commercial lien holder registry. The audience in my head would have laughed hysterically if they knew the actual truth. That vehicle was not a paid-off company asset in the way Jamal arrogantly assumed. 2 weeks ago, when I first caught Marcus texting Vanessa late at night, I executed a very quiet, highly destructive little financial maneuver. The car was heavily leveraged under a toxic, variable high-interest commercial loan that I had strategically transferred entirely into Marcus's name, using his personal executive credit profile. By claiming the vehicle as a corporate asset and taking physical possession of it, Marcus and Jamal had just voluntarily assumed a mountain of aggressive, unforgiving debt. The first massive balloon payment was due in exactly 48 hours, and Marcus did not have the personal liquidity to cover even a fraction of the penalty interest. I took another sip of my cold, bitter coffee, feeling an immense wave of warm satisfaction wash over my entire body. The trap was perfectly set, and they had just danced right into the center of it, completely blind to the digital and financial landmines I had buried all around their feet. Suddenly, my cell phone buzzed violently on the cheap wooden nightstand, followed immediately by a sharp, high-pitched ping from my laptop speakers. A critical, high-priority notification flashed across my dark terminal screen in bright green text. It was an automated alert from the offshore banking gateway I had specifically engineered for M Capital. The text read, "Incoming wire transfer pending. $5 million from the Richard and Brenda Joint Retirement Trust account." My greedy status-obsessed in-laws had actually done it. They had liquidated their entire life savings, every last cent they possessed, and wired it directly into the firm. A small, flashing confirmation box appeared in the center of my screen, waiting patiently for the final administrative clearance. I smiled a genuine, terrifying smile that reached my eyes. I clicked the approve button. The $5 million hit the M Capital corporate ledger for exactly 1 single second before my sweeper protocol engaged. The massive sum of money instantly vanished, rerouted rapidly through a dozen encrypted legal shell corporations, and deposited cleanly into my highly secure Swiss account. 30 miles away in the penthouse suite of the M Capital headquarters, the celebration was already underway. Through the remote access portal on my laptop, I had a live, unrestricted view of their internal network activity, including the security camera feeds I had installed last year. The high-definition video feed showed Marcus and Jamal standing in the center of the lavish, glass-walled office. Marcus popped the cork on a bottle of Dom Perignon, the foam spilling over his expensive Italian leather shoes. He handed a filled crystal flute to Jamal, who raised it in a triumphant toast to their absolute brilliance. They turned their attention to the massive digital dashboard mounted on the far wall. The screen flashed with a vibrant green notification, proudly displaying a confirmed balance of $5 million in the primary operating account. Marcus slapped Jamal on the back, both men laughing hysterically. They had absolutely no idea they were cheering at a ghost. During our first year of marriage, when I realized Marcus could not even read a basic profit and loss statement, I designed a customized shadow interface for the company network. It was essentially a highly sophisticated digital sandbox meant to stroke his fragile ego. The dashboard they were currently worshipping was programmed to display whatever projected numbers would keep Marcus feeling like a Wall Street titan, completely divorced from the actual empty bank ledgers. The $5 million they thought they were looking at was nothing more than a few lines of cosmetic code I had written while sipping tea on my couch. My phone buzzed against the motel desk, snapping my attention away from the live feed of their pathetic celebration. The caller ID displayed my mother-in-law, Brenda. I let it ring 3 times, taking a slow, centering breath before swiping to answer. I did not say hello. I simply waited in total silence. Maya, I hope you are enjoying whatever cheap motel you dragged yourself into, Brenda announced loudly. Her voice echoed slightly, indicating she had me on speakerphone, likely with Vanessa sitting right beside her. I am calling as a courtesy, though frankly, you do not deserve even that. I remained perfectly quiet, letting her suffocating arrogance fill the dead air. Since Marcus is finally free of your dead weight, we are hosting a massive engagement gala for him and Vanessa this Saturday evening at the country club. Brenda continued, her tone dripping with malicious glee. I want to make it absolutely clear that you are not on the guest list. Do not bother showing up to cause a scene. Do not try to contact the club manager. We are celebrating the future of M Capital and the fact that we finally have a real woman in this family. A woman who knows how to nurture a man and build a proper legacy. The sheer cruelty of her words was designed to break me, to elicit a scream or a sob that she could record and play for her country club friends as proof of my instability. 2 days ago, a comment like that about being a real woman would have shattered my heart into a million jagged pieces, especially after the silent, agonizing fertility struggles Marcus and I had endured, a struggle he blamed entirely on me. I hope you all wear your absolute best to the gala. Brenda? I replied, my voice smooth, light, and completely devoid of emotion. Saturday is going to be an unforgettable night for the entire family. Make sure Jamal and Richard are standing right in the front row. I hung up the phone before she could process the strange, cheerful calm in my response. I tossed the device onto the bed and turned my full, undivided attention back to my encrypted laptop screen. There was no time to dwell on Brenda and her petty, vicious insults. I had a financial empire to completely dismantle before the weekend. My fingers began to fly across the mechanical keyboard in a rhythmic, relentless blur. Jamal thought his airtight post-nuptial agreement had stripped me of all marital assets, but he was dealing with a woman who built digital labyrinths for a living. I bypassed the M Capital mainframe and logged directly into the joint investment portfolios Marcus and I technically still shared. I had anticipated Jamal using a boilerplate legal template to draft my exit, which meant he had completely neglected to freeze the secondary asset classes nested under my maiden name. I initiated a rapid series of aggressive liquidations. I sold off our shared tech stocks, dumped the high-yield municipal bonds, and emptied the emergency corporate reserve funds I had personally managed. I did not transfer the capital into a traditional bank account. where Jamal could legally attempt to freeze it. Instead, I routed the freshly liquidated cash through a secure, decentralized exchange. Within 45 minutes, I had converted nearly $2 million in remaining joint assets into untraceable cryptocurrency. From there, I tumbled the crypto through 3 different international privacy mixers before permanently converting it into stable Swiss francs, depositing the final sum directly into my offshore ledger alongside Richard and Brenda's vanished $5 million. By the time I finished typing, Marcus was officially penniless, drowning in toxic debt, and completely oblivious to his own ruin. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to a secure international airline portal. I booked a one-way first-class ticket to Zurich, Switzerland. The departure time was scheduled for exactly 8 o'clock this coming Saturday night, right as the country club waiters would be serving the first round of appetizers at Marcus and Vanessa's lavish engagement gala. As I clicked confirm on the flight itinerary, a highly secure encrypted email client on my desktop chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender address was masked, routed through a government proxy server I had been secretly communicating with for the past 3 weeks. I opened the message. It was from a senior investigator at the Securities and Exchange Commission. The text was incredibly brief, but it hit my chest with the force of a freight train. We verified the anonymous tip and the offshore routing logs you provided. The federal warrants have been signed by the judge. The raid on M Capital and the associated country club event is officially scheduled for this Saturday night. I leaned back in the cheap motel chair, watching the neon sign outside flicker through the blinds. The trap was not just set, it was sealed. Saturday night, my plane would be lifting off into the clouds, and the federal agents would be kicking down the doors of Marcus's perfect new life. Saturday evening arrived with the crisp, suffocating elegance that only a high-society Connecticut country club could manufacture. Valets in crisp white shirts rushed to open the doors of arriving luxury vehicles, completely unaware that the hosts of the evening were officially bankrupt. Inside the grand ballroom, tiered crystal chandeliers illuminated a sea of tailored suits and designer gowns. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, roasted prime rib, and the unmistakable arrogance of stolen wealth. Marcus stood near a towering ice sculpture carved into the shape of a $sign. He was wearing a custom velvet tuxedo, looking every bit the triumphant billionaire he pretended to be. Vanessa clung tightly to his arm, her pregnant belly draped in shimmering silver silk, soaking in the breathless admiration of her equally vapid family members. Across the expansive room, Jamal was entirely in his element. He held a crystal glass of aged bourbon in one hand, aggressively gesturing with the other as he cornered a group of local politicians and venture capitalists. I overheard him boasting loudly about how he had single-handedly masterminded M Capital's massive new funding round. It takes a certain level of aggressive legal intellect to move $5 million seamlessly into a corporate infrastructure, Jamal bragged to a stunned city councilman, claiming his brilliance had secured the investment that would revolutionize the sector. He was so incredibly busy selling his own genius that he completely failed to notice the storm walking right through the front doors. I stepped into the opulent foyer wearing a sleek crimson designer gown that hugged every curve, a razor-sharp departure from the conservative, invisible gray pantsuits my in-laws always expected me to hide inside. Outside, my private black car service idled quietly in the circular driveway. The trunk was already loaded with my luggage, the engine running, waiting to whisk me directly to the airport for my first-class flight to Zurich the moment this final curtain closed. 2 burly security guards immediately stepped into my path, their earpieces buzzing with alert codes. One of them held up a laminated guest list, politely but firmly, informing me that my name was strictly prohibited from entering the private event. I did not argue, and I did not raise my voice. I simply opened my clutch, pulled out a solid metal black VIP investor card, and handed it to the head of security. That card was the absolute highest tier of club membership, purchased years ago under a heavily shielded corporate alias. I controlled, granting me unrestricted access to any event on the property. The guard swiped the card, watched the bright green approved light flash on his terminal, and stepped aside with a hurried, nervous apology. I glided into the ballroom, securing a pristine vodka martini from a passing waiter. It took less than 2 minutes for the illusion of their perfect night to crack. Richard, my father-in-law, spotted me from across the room. His face flushed a dangerous, unpredictable shade of purple as he abruptly abandoned his conversation. He stormed directly toward me, his heavy footsteps echoing over the delicate string quartet playing in the background. "How dare you show your face here tonight?" Richard hissed, stepping uncomfortably close to keep his vicious words hidden from the surrounding guests. "You are a disgraced, pathetic dropout, who could not even give my son a child. You do not belong in this world, Maya. Get out before I have security physically throw you onto the street like the trash you are." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my martini, letting the icy liquid cool my throat. I did not flinch at his cruel, calculated jab about my fertility. I simply looked him up and down, analyzing him the exact same way I would analyze a fraudulent ledger. I noted the expensive, heavy gold Rolex gleaming on his wrist. 3 years ago, Richard was weeping uncontrollably on my living room floor, begging for his life. He had embezzled $250,000 from his previous employer to cover a string of catastrophic underground gambling debts. The loan sharks were actively threatening to break his legs, and his company was drafting the police report to send him to federal prison. I was the one who quietly liquidated my early stock options, paid off the violent bookies in cash, and anonymously reimbursed his company to save him from a 10-year prison sentence. I kept that massive, humiliating secret completely hidden from Marcus and Brenda to protect Richard's fragile pride and preserve the pristine family reputation. Now this same man was calling me a disgrace. "That is a very bold tone for a man who still owes me $250,000, Richard," I whispered, leaning forward, so only he could hear the lethal calm in my voice. I kept the financial receipts from the Bellagio bookies and the offshore wire transfers. I wonder exactly how quickly the country club board would revoke your prestigious membership if they saw the exact criminal trail I covered up to keep you out of a federal penitentiary. Richard choked on his next breath. The aggressive red color drained from his face instantly, leaving him a sickly, pale white. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a dry, pathetic wheeze escaped his throat. He took a stumbling step backward, the horrifying realization hitting him that the helpless daughter-in-law he thought he was bullying held the absolute keys to his complete destruction. Before Richard could recover his footing, a loud screech of microphone feedback pierced the ballroom. The string quartet stopped playing abruptly. At the front of the room, Marcus tapped the microphone, flashing his signature charismatic smile to the hushed crowd. Vanessa stood dutifully behind him, beaming as the wealthy guests directed their undivided attention to the stage. Behind them, a massive high-definition projector screen hummed to life, displaying the M Capital corporate logo in bold, glowing letters. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate our new family and the massive, undeniable future of M Capital." Marcus announced, his voice oozing with unearned confidence. "Jamal and I have been working tirelessly to secure our latest $5 million funding round. To honor this monumental achievement, I want to share our live investment dashboard with you all right now. I want Vanessa's family to see exactly what kind of financial empire they are joining tonight." Marcus gestured grandly toward the projector screen. The crowd began to clap politely in anticipation of the grand financial reveal. I stood quietly at the back of the room, completely unnoticed by the cheering guests. I pulled my phone from my clutch and opened a custom encrypted application I had built specifically for this exact moment. The screen illuminated a single bright red button. Pressing it would instantly strip away the fake cosmetic code masking the M Capital dashboard, revealing the absolute zero balance to the entire room, while simultaneously signaling the federal agents waiting outside the country club gates to execute their raid. My thumb hovered millimeters above the glowing red glass. Marcus's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, dripping with a sickening level of false humility. He held Vanessa close to his side, his hand resting possessively on her pregnant stomach. "Family." Marcus began sweeping his free hand across the audience. "They say you cannot choose your family, but in business, you absolutely can. And tonight, looking around this incredible room, I am so deeply honored by the family we have built here at M Capital. He paused, waiting for the polite applause and murmurs of approval to ripple through the wealthy crowd. We are standing on the precipice of a new era, an era defined by aggressive growth, unshakable loyalty, and unparalleled business genius. Marcus pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at Jamal, who raised his bourbon glass in smug acknowledgement. None of this would be possible without my partner Jamal. His unmatched financial strategy, his brilliant legal mind, and his flawless execution have navigated us through the complex waters of venture capital. Thanks to his relentless dedication, we did not just meet our funding goals this quarter. We completely shattered them. The crowd erupted into enthusiastic applause. Vanessa's parents, sitting at the front VIP table, beamed with pride, completely sold on the illusion of Marcus as a corporate titan. Richard, standing near the bar, looked visibly relieved that his own shameful secrets remained buried for now. Marcus held up a small wireless clicker, soaking in the admiration. Jamal and I believe in total transparency with our investors. Tonight, we want to share our live operating dashboard with you. I want everyone in this room, especially my beautiful future wife and her wonderful family, to see the exact strength of the foundation we are building our legacy upon. Marcus aimed the clicker at the ceiling-mounted projector. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the future of M Capital. He pressed the button. At that exact fraction of a second, my thumb came down hard on the glowing red glass of my phone screen. The custom execution protocol engaged instantly, bypassing their entire firewall. The massive projector screen behind Marcus flashed a brilliant, blinding white. The triumphant corporate theme music that was supposed to accompany the reveal abruptly cut out, replaced by a harsh, grating burst of digital static. The high-definition M Capital logo shattered into a chaotic mosaic of distorted pixels. Marcus frowned, tapping his clicker again. Just a minor technical glitch? He chuckled nervously into the microphone, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. You know how these high-tech systems can be. The screen did not return to his carefully curated lie. Instead, the pixels violently rearranged themselves into a stark, glaring document. It was a massive, uneditable IRS federal tax default notice displayed in brutal high resolution for every single guest to read. The official government seal loomed over the text like a grim reaper. The document explicitly detailed years of corporate tax evasion, fraudulent filings, illegal asset transfers, and severe federal penalties levied directly against Marcus and his executive profiles. It listed warrants for immediate asset seizure and cited criminal liabilities. But the true horror for Marcus and Jamal was the live financial ticker anchored to the bottom of the screen. The numbers began to spin. First, it proudly showed the fabricated $5 million balance they had been bragging about all night. Then the cosmetic shadow code I had just shredded fell away completely. The digits dropped in real time, spinning backward with the dizzying speed of a broken slot machine. The 5 million vanished, dropping to 3, then 1, then plummeting past 0 into the deep, unforgiving red. The ticker violently halted, flashing a brilliant, catastrophic crimson. Negative $2,450,000. A collective, horrified gasp echoed through the ballroom. The polite silence of the wealthy elite instantly dissolved into a chaotic murmur of shock and outrage. Investors who had just written massive checks stared at the screen in absolute disbelief, reaching for their phones to call their banks. Vanessa's parents leaped from their chairs, their faces pale with panic as the illusion of their daughter marrying wealth disintegrated before their eyes. Vanessa dropped her hands from her stomach, staring at the catastrophic negative balance with her jaw hanging wide open. Richard gripped the edge of the bar, looking as though he was about to suffer a massive heart attack. "Turn it off!" Marcus hissed desperately into the hot microphone, his voice cracking with pure terror. He frantically mashed the buttons on his clicker, but the device was completely dead, locked out by the overriding root access I commanded. Jamal, shut it down. Cut the power right now. Jamal was no longer the arrogant, bourbon-sipping mastermind. He had dropped his crystal glass, shattering it on the marble floor in a spray of amber liquid and jagged shards. He furiously tapped the screen of his sleek tablet, his fingers trembling wildly. His confident demeanor was completely pulverized as a relentless flood of red error codes multiplied across his screen. Access denied, system override, account frozen, administrative lockout. I cannot get in, Jamal screamed, completely abandoning his polished corporate persona. He practically threw the useless tablet onto a nearby cocktail table, ignoring the startled guests around him, and lunged toward the stage. He grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his custom velvet tuxedo, nearly hauling him off his feet. Marcus, what the hell is this? Where is the money? Where is the $5 million we transferred this morning? Where is my money? I do not know, Marcus shrieked back, batting Jamal's hands away as panic consumed him. You said the transfer was secure. You said the post-nuptial agreement locked her out of the operating accounts. You told me this was airtight. It was airtight! Jamal roared, his face flushed purple with rage and fear. I verified the routing numbers myself. Someone completely bypassed the security grid. The offshore accounts are completely empty. We have absolutely nothing. The microphone Marcus was still clutching fed back with a deafening, ear-splitting screech that forced half the guests in the room to cover their ears. The horrific sound cut through the rising panic, shocking the ballroom into a sudden, terrified silence. I stepped out from the shadows at the back of the room. The automated spotlight tracking system, which I had also cheerfully hacked into earlier that afternoon, immediately pivoted. A brilliant beam of bright white light snapped onto me, illuminating my sleek crimson designer gown. I stood tall, my posture relaxed, and completely composed amidst the absolute wreckage of their lives. I raised my silver cocktail pick and tapped it gently against the rim of my martini glass. The sharp, crystal-clear ping echoed perfectly across the cavernous room. Every single eye, including the horrified, wide-eyed stares of Marcus, Vanessa, Jamal, and Richard, locked onto me. Looking for this, Jamal? I asked, my voice projecting crisp and clear without needing a microphone at all. I reached into my clutch and slowly pulled out a sleek titanium USB drive, holding it up into the blinding spotlight for all of them to see. 30 miles away in the gleaming penthouse suite of the M Capital headquarters, the celebration was already underway. Through the remote access portal on my laptop, I had a live, unrestricted view of their internal network activity, including the hidden security camera feeds I had discreetly installed last year to monitor server maintenance. The high-definition video feed showed Marcus and Jamal standing in the center of the lavish glass-walled office overlooking the city skyline. Marcus eagerly popped the cork on a fresh bottle of Dom Perignon, the expensive foam spilling wildly over his custom Italian leather shoes. He poured the champagne and handed a filled crystal flute to Jamal, who raised it high in a triumphant toast to their absolute brilliance. They both turned their rapt attention to the massive digital dashboard mounted on the far wall of the office. The screen flashed with a vibrant green notification, proudly displaying a confirmed balance of $5 million in the primary operating account. Marcus slapped Jamal hard on the back, both men laughing hysterically as they celebrated their newfound wealth. They had absolutely no idea they were cheering at a ghost. During our first year of marriage, when I quickly realized Marcus could not even read a basic profit and loss statement without asking for my help, I designed a customized shadow interface for the company network. It was essentially a highly sophisticated digital sandbox meant to stroke his fragile ego and keep him from interfering with the actual financial architecture. The dashboard they were currently worshipping was programmed to display whatever projected numbers would keep Marcus feeling like a Wall Street titan, completely divorced from the actual, empty bank ledgers. The $5 million they thought they were looking at was nothing more than a few lines of cosmetic code I had written while sipping green tea on my couch. The actual funds were already secured safely under my name in Switzerland. My cell phone buzzed violently against the cheap laminate wood of the motel desk, snapping my attention away from the live feed of their pathetic premature celebration. The caller ID displayed my mother-in-law, Brenda. I let the phone vibrate 3 times, taking a slow, centering breath to prepare myself before swiping the screen to answer. I did not say hello. I simply waited in total silence, letting the line stay open. Maya, I certainly hope you are enjoying whatever cheap, filthy motel you dragged yourself into, Brenda announced loudly. Her voice echoed slightly, indicating she had me on speakerphone, likely with Vanessa sitting right beside her in their pristine living room, eagerly listening in. I am calling strictly as a courtesy, though, frankly, you do not deserve even that basic level of respect after the embarrassment you caused my son. I remained perfectly quiet, letting her suffocating arrogance fill the dead air. I could hear the faint clinking of a teacup in the background. Since Marcus is finally free of your dead weight, we are hosting a massive engagement gala for him and Vanessa this coming Saturday evening at the country club. Brenda continued, her tone dripping with malicious, unrestrained glee. I want to make it absolutely clear to you right now that you are not on the guest list. Do not bother showing up to cause a scene. Do not try to contact the club manager to beg for entry. We are celebrating the bright, lucrative future of M Capital, and the fact that we finally have a real woman in this family. A young, vibrant woman who actually knows how to nurture a powerful man and build a proper family legacy. The sheer cruelty of her words was precisely designed to break me, to elicit a scream or a pathetic sob that she could record and play for her wealthy country club friends as undeniable proof of my emotional instability. 2 days ago, a targeted comment like that, about being a real woman, would have shattered my heart into a million jagged pieces, especially after the silent, agonizing fertility struggles Marcus and I had endured. A painful struggle he had selfishly blamed entirely on me. I hope you all wear your absolute best to the gala. Brenda, I replied, my voice remarkably smooth, light, and completely devoid of any negative emotion. Saturday is going to be an unforgettable night for the entire family. Make absolutely certain that Jamal and Richard are standing right in the front row for the big toast. I hung up the phone before she could even begin to process the strange, cheerful calm in my response. I tossed the mobile device onto the unmade motel bed and turned my full, undivided attention back to my encrypted laptop screen. There was simply no time to dwell on Brenda and her petty, vicious insults. I had a massive financial empire to completely dismantle before the weekend arrived. My fingers began to fly across the mechanical keyboard in a rhythmic, relentless blur of keystrokes. Jamal honestly thought his airtight post-nuptial agreement had successfully stripped me of all marital assets, but he was dealing with a woman who built complex digital labyrinths for a living. I bypassed the main M Capital mainframe entirely and logged directly into the joint investment portfolios Marcus and I technically still shared on paper. I had correctly anticipated that Jamal, in his arrogant rush, would use a standard boilerplate legal template to draft my exit from the company. That critical oversight meant he had completely neglected to freeze the secondary asset classes nested securely under my maiden name. I initiated a rapid, heavily encrypted series of aggressive market liquidations. I ruthlessly sold off our shared blue-chip tech stocks, dumped the high-yield municipal bonds we had acquired last year, and completely emptied the emergency corporate reserve funds I had personally managed since the firm's inception. I did not transfer the capital into a traditional domestic bank account where Jamal could legally attempt to freeze it with a court order. Instead, I routed the freshly liquidated cash through a highly secure decentralized digital exchange. Within 45 minutes, I had systematically converted nearly $2 million in remaining joint assets into completely untraceable cryptocurrency. From there, I tumbled the crypto assets through 3 different international privacy mixers, effectively scrubbing their origin before permanently converting the entire balance into stable Swiss francs. I deposited the final, staggering sum directly into my offshore ledger alongside Richard and Brenda's vanished $5 million. By the time I finished typing the final execution command, Marcus was officially penniless, drowning in a toxic sea of variable high-interest commercial debt, and completely oblivious to his own impending ruin. I opened a new secure browser tab and navigated directly to a premium international airline portal. I booked a one-way first-class ticket to Zurich, Switzerland. The flight departure time was scheduled for exactly 8 o'clock this coming Saturday night, right at the precise moment the country club waiters would be serving the first round of expensive appetizers at Marcus and Vanessa's lavish engagement gala. I paid for the ticket using the last remaining funds from Marcus's personal platinum credit card. As I clicked the final confirmation button on the flight itinerary, a highly secure encrypted email client hidden on my desktop chimed with an incoming high-priority message. The sender address was heavily masked, routed through a complex government proxy server I had been secretly communicating with for the past 3 weeks. I quickly opened the message, my eyes scanning the text. It was from a senior lead investigator at the Securities and Exchange Commission. The text was incredibly brief, lacking any formal greeting, but it hit my chest with the unstoppable force of a freight train. We verified the anonymous tip and the offshore routing logs you provided regarding the fraudulent tax filings. The federal search and seizure warrants have been officially signed by the federal judge. The coordinated raid on the M Capital headquarters and the associated country club event is officially scheduled for this Saturday night. I leaned back in the cheap, uncomfortable motel chair, watching the flickering neon vacancy sign outside cast long shadows through the dusty window blinds. The trap I had so carefully constructed was no longer just set. It was permanently sealed. Saturday night, my plane would be lifting off into the clouds, safely carrying me toward a new life of absolute financial freedom, and the federal agents would be kicking down the polished wooden doors of Marcus's perfect stolen new life. Let them pop their champagne now, I thought, a cold smile touching my lips. The hangover they were about to experience would last for the rest of their miserable lives. The polished metallic casing of the drive caught the intense glare of the spotlight, mesmerizing the panicked, breathless crowd. Marcus shattered the frozen silence. He lunged violently off the presentation stage, his custom leather shoes slipping awkwardly on the spilled champagne that coated the polished marble floor. He charged down the center aisle of the ballroom, shoving past a group of startled investors. His face was contorted into a hideous mask of pure, unfiltered rage. The heavy veins in his neck bulged against his tight tuxedo collar as he closed the distance between us. "Fix the screen right now," Marcus roared, his voice cracking with utter hysteria. "You hacked my company, you psychotic, jealous witch! You hacked my entire network!" I did not step back. I did not flinch. I stood my ground, my posture perfectly straight as he barreled toward me. He stopped only when the two massive security guards, the same men who had previously tried to block my entry, stepped directly in front of me. They crossed their thick arms, forming an impenetrable human barricade. Marcus slammed into them, clawing desperately at the air, demanding I reverse the negative numbers flashing relentlessly on the giant projector screen behind him. I calmly lowered the USB drive and reached into the hidden silk pocket of my crimson gown. I pulled out a crisp, neatly folded stack of legal documents. It was the exact post-nuptial agreement Jamal had so proudly shoved in my face at the grimy motel just days ago. I slipped gracefully past the barricade of security guards and walked directly up to Jamal. He was still staring at his frozen, useless tablet in total disbelief. "Your company, Marcus?" I asked, my voice carrying a lethal, echoing chill across the dead, silent ballroom. I turned my unyielding gaze to his best friend. "Jamal, you are the legal genius here, the brilliant architect of this massive corporate transition." Read Clause 4, Section B out loud for the crowd. Jamal snatched the thick parchment from my outstretched hand. His eyes darted frantically across the page, desperately scanning the dense legal jargon he had personally drafted and authorized. I watched the exact second his immense, overinflated hubris evaporated into thin air. The vibrant color completely drained from his face, leaving him a sickening, ashen shade of gray. His tailored navy suit suddenly looked 2 sizes too big as his broad shoulders slumped in absolute crushing defeat. His hands began to shake violently, the heavy legal paper rattling loudly in his unsteady grip. "Read it, Jamal," I commanded, stepping uncomfortably close to him. "Read it to the investors who just gave you their money. Read it to the politicians you were just bragging to. Read it to Vanessa." Jamal swallowed hard, his throat clicking audibly in the suffocating quiet of the room. He opened his mouth, but only a pathetic, broken stammer emerged. "Read it!" Marcus bellowed from behind the security guards, completely misunderstanding the sheer terror in his partner's eyes. "Tell her she gets absolutely nothing." Jamal squeezed his eyes shut for a brief, agonizing second before forcing himself to look down at the document. "All assets currently operating under the M Capital proprietary software license." Jamal stammered, his previously booming, authoritative voice reduced to a fragile, trembling whisper. All intellectual property, algorithmic coding, and associated financial routing frameworks remain the sole intellectual and financial property of the original code author. Jamal paused, looking up at Marcus with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. He swallowed again, forcing out the final, devastating word, Maya. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the heavy, crushing silence of a bomb detonating and sucking all the oxygen from the room. Marcus stopped struggling against the security guards. His arms fell limply to his sides as the catastrophic reality of Jamal's words crashed into his brain. He had not secured a multi-million-dollar financial institution. He had secured a hollow, worthless digital shell. By forcing me to sign that specific post-nuptial agreement under extreme duress, Jamal had unknowingly executed an ironclad legal transfer of every single valuable digital and financial asset back to my exclusive ownership. I had designed the entire corporate structure so that the operating licenses were tied directly to my personal developer signature. Jamal was so incredibly eager to strip me of the physical assets like the house, the luxury cars, and the domestic bank accounts that he used a blanket intellectual property clause to expedite the divorce proceedings. He legally protected the software, assuming it was automatically registered to the corporate entity, but it was registered exclusively to me. They had legally handed me the entire financial empire just to get me out of the way. The wealthy crowd began to murmur, a rising panicked tide of powerful investors, realizing their massive checks had just vanished into a legal black hole, created by the very men asking for their trust. Vanessa stood completely frozen on the stage, her hands clutching her silver designer dress, totally forgotten by the man who had promised her the world. The illusion of their perfect, wealthy future was dead. Suddenly, a piercing, guttural shriek shattered the murmurs. Brenda shoved her way roughly through the crowd of stunned guests, knocking over a tray of champagne flutes. Her face was twisted in absolute primal panic. She marched to the front of the room and pointed a shaking, jewel-encrusted finger at the glowing projector screen, displaying the negative $2 million balance. "That is my retirement fund!" Brenda screamed, her voice echoing wildly off the crystal chandeliers. Every single cent Richard and I had in the entire world was in that account. Marcus, tell me she did not steal our money. I looked at Brenda, feeling a deep, profound sense of closure wash over my entire being. The cruel, arrogant woman, who had spent over a decade making me feel utterly worthless, who had mocked my clothing, my background, and my inability to conceive, was now begging for her financial life in front of the entire country club elite. I took one final step forward, stepping directly into the center of the brilliant spotlight. I let the bright beam illuminate the absolute certainty and triumph on my face. I held my microphone steady, making sure every single person in the room heard my final words. "I did not steal it, Brenda," I stated, my voice echoing with crushing finality. "Your son legally gifted it to me when he signed this paper to kick me out for his mistress." Brenda staggered backward as if I had physically struck her across the face. She clutched her chest, her heavy diamond necklace glittering mockingly against her trembling collarbone. The absolute certainty of her financial ruin paralyzed her completely. She looked toward her husband Richard, seeking a rescue that would never come. Richard was already backing away toward the exit, his face a mask of sweaty, guilty terror, knowing his own embezzlement secrets were merely a breath away from public exposure. But the most spectacular implosion was happening right on the presentation stage. Vanessa, the woman who had proudly paraded her pregnant belly around the ballroom all evening, like a trophy of her ultimate victory, was visibly vibrating with rage. The shimmering silver silk of her designer gown suddenly looked absurdly cheap against the glaring red numbers of the projector screen behind her. The fairy tale narrative she had sold to her wealthy parents sitting at the front table was burning to ash in real time. She slowly turned toward Marcus. The adoring, subservient gaze she had worn for months was completely gone, replaced by the feral panic of a woman realizing she had anchored herself to a sinking ship. "You lied to me!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria as she shoved Marcus hard in the chest. "You told me you were a self-made millionaire, Marcus. You swore to me that this company was pulling in 8 figures. You promised me the sprawling house in the suburbs and the brand new Range Rover. You told my parents you were securing our future. Marcus desperately tried to grab her hands, his charismatic facade entirely shattered. Vanessa, please calm down, he pleaded, his voice a pathetic high-pitched whine. We can fix this. Jamal just made a routing error. It is a simple administrative mistake. I can get the money back. Do not do this right now. I watched the pathetic display with nothing but icy pity. The sheer delusion required to maintain their fragile reality was almost impressive. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the edge of the stage, the crimson fabric of my gown sweeping across the floor. There is no routing error to fix Marcus, I stated calmly, cutting through his desperate lies with surgical precision. And there is absolutely no money to get back. I shifted my gaze directly to Vanessa. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and desperate seeking terror. That lavish, sprawling suburban house you have been busy redecorating for the past 3 weeks? I asked, tilting my head slightly. The house is currently in active foreclosure, sweetheart. Marcus never actually qualified for that mortgage on his own. My corporate income secured the loan, and I completely stopped paying the premium the exact day you moved your designer luggage into my master bedroom. The bank finalized the eviction notices this morning. Vanessa gasped, taking a stumbling step backward. Her hands flew to her mouth as the reality of her impending homelessness slammed into her. And as for that brand new custom interior Range Rover you drove here tonight, I continued, my voice echoing clearly through the dead silent ballroom. It is legally scheduled for forced repossession at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. You see, Marcus used my secondary credit profile as a blind guarantor for the dealership lease. When I permanently froze my credit files yesterday, the dealership flagged the account for immediate asset recovery. You do not have a millionaire fiancé, Vanessa. You have a broke, unemployed fraud who is about to be physically locked out of his own life. Vanessa let out a guttural sob. She spun around and fled off the side of the stage, ignoring Marcus as he screamed her name. She ran directly into the arms of her horrified parents, who were already frantically gathering their coats to escape the humiliation. Before Marcus could even process the loss of his trophy fiancée, a new, far more violent eruption exploded near the center of the room. Jamal had been completely paralyzed, staring at the catastrophic negative balance on his tablet. But his wife Tiffany was not frozen. Tiffany was a brilliantly sharp, no-nonsense woman who had spent years building a successful pediatric dental practice. She had trusted her husband's financial expertise implicitly. Now that trust was violently shattering into pieces. She marched directly up to Jamal, her designer heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She grabbed him aggressively by the thick lapels of his tailored navy suit, pulling his face down to her level. "Tell me you did not do it, Jamal," Tiffany screamed, her voice vibrating with a terrifying, lethal rage. "Tell me you did not touch our personal accounts." Jamal was sweating profusely. Thick drops of perspiration rolled down his forehead, soaking into his crisp white collar. "Tiffany, baby, listen to me," he stammered, raising his trembling hands in a desperate attempt to placate her. It was a guaranteed return. Marcus assured me the code was proprietary. I was just trying to multiply our liquid assets before the quarter ended. "You put our kids' college funds into his fake company," Tiffany roared, shaking him so violently his head snapped back. "You drained our savings to float this idiot. You looked me directly in the eye and swore to me that you personally audited her corporate ledgers. You said she was just a bitter ex-wife trying to cause trouble. I audited what I was given." Jamal pleaded, his voice breaking, as he desperately tried to back away from his furious wife. The African-American financial hotshot, the man who had built an entire career on his supposedly flawless legal and analytical intellect, was completely deteriorating before my eyes. He finally realized his own blinding hubris, his absolute certainty that he was smarter than the quiet woman sitting on the couch had just bankrupted his entire family. "She built a shadow network," Jamal whimpered, gesturing weakly toward me. "She faked the entire operating interface. I could not see the actual holding accounts." Tiffany shoved him away with such intense disgust that Jamal stumbled and crashed into a cocktail table, sending crystal glasses shattering across the floor. "You arrogant, stupid man," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You let your ego destroy our children's future." The ballroom had descended into total, unmanageable chaos. High society guests were literally running for the exit doors, desperate to distance themselves from the toxic fallout of M Capital. Brenda was collapsed in a chair, weeping uncontrollably, while Richard stared blankly at the wall. Marcus was on his knees on the stage, pulling his hair and screaming at the projector screen to change. I stood completely still amidst the absolute wreckage of their lives. I raised my martini glass and took a slow, final sip of the icy liquid. The vodka burned pleasantly down my throat, a perfect complement to the warmth of absolute justice. Then, the visual atmosphere of the room dramatically shifted. The heavy, sheer white curtains draping the massive ballroom windows were suddenly illuminated from the outside. Brilliant strobing flashes of aggressive red and blue light cut through the elegant fabric painting the walls of the country club in the unmistakable colors of a massive police raid. The low ambient hum of the panicked crowd was instantly drowned out by the deafening, overlapping wail of multiple emergency sirens converging on the property. The shrieking alarms grew louder by the second, piercing the glass and vibrating through the floorboards. Through the front glass doors of the foyer, I could see the silhouettes of federal agents dressed in heavy tactical gear and dark windbreakers emblazoned with bright yellow SEC and IRS lettering. They were marching in perfect, synchronized formation, straight up the circular driveway, their heavy boots hitting the pavement with the unstoppable force of federal justice. The heavy mahogany double doors of the country club ballroom did not just open, they were violently breached. A dozen federal agents wearing tactical vests, emblazoned with sharp yellow SEC and IRS acronyms, flooded the opulent space. The refined, suffocating air of the high society gala was instantly obliterated by the aggressive, synchronized stomp of heavy boots on the polished marble. The delicate string quartet, which had been frozen in terror since the projector screen displayed the massive tax default, scrambled backward, knocking over their music stands in a desperate bid to get out of the way. "Marcus Vance and Jamal Washington, keep your hands exactly where we can see them." The lead agent roared, his voice cutting through the rising panic of the wealthy guests like a serrated blade. "Do not make a single sudden movement." The sheer magnitude of the raid sent shockwaves through the crowd. Venture capitalists and local politicians, men and women who had just been eagerly shaking Marcus's hand and drinking his expensive champagne, immediately began backing away. They treated him as if he had suddenly contracted a lethal, highly contagious disease. Vanessa's parents, who only moments ago had been practically weeping with pride over their daughter's incredibly lucrative engagement, were now frantically shoving their way through the throng of terrified guests, abandoning Vanessa completely in their desperate rush to escape the federal dragnet. Marcus stood paralyzed on the stage, his perfectly tailored velvet tuxedo suddenly looking like a clown suit. His eyes darted wildly from the federal agents swarming the exits to the glaring red negative balance still illuminating the massive projector screen behind him. His brain fueled entirely by unearned arrogance and borrowed money simply could not process the absolute reality of his destruction. Then his frantic gaze locked onto me. I was still standing in the direct center of the spotlight, holding my pristine vodka martini, watching his empire burn to ash. The sight of my total, unshakable composure seemed to snap Marcus out of his stunned silence and ignite a desperate, feral rage. "Arrest her!" Marcus screamed, his voice cracking violently as he pointed a shaking, manicured finger directly at my chest. "What are you doing looking at me? She is the one you want. She is a psychotic hacker. She just stole $5 million from my company accounts. She breached a secure corporate firewall and hijacked this entire presentation. Do your jobs and put her in cuffs." The lead agent did not even flinch at Marcus's hysterical demands. He signaled to two heavily armed officers who immediately flanked the stage, effectively trapping Marcus and Jamal in a federal cage. "She completely drained my offshore accounts." Marcus continued to rant, his face flushed a dangerous mottled shade of crimson. "She orchestrated this entire financial collapse to ruin me because I filed for divorce. She is a bitter, vindictive thief. I took a slow, deliberate step out of the spotlight, the silk of my crimson gown brushing softly against the floor. I did not raise my voice, but the absolute lethal calm in my tone carried effortlessly across the dead silent ballroom. I did not steal a single dime, Marcus. I stated clearly, my eyes locking onto his panicked face. You cannot steal money that never actually existed. I simply removed the cosmetic digital interface I built to hide the catastrophic reality of your gross incompetence. As for the $5 million, those funds were legally routed back to the primary intellectual property holder, according to the exact binding post-nuptial agreement your brilliant legal counsel drafted to expedite his own payday. Jamal choked on a dry heave, his hands gripping his head as the inescapable trap closed entirely around him. He knew exactly what he had done. He had weaponized his legal expertise to strip me of everything, and in doing so, he had handed me the absolute legal authority to dismantle them. He is committing wire fraud, Marcus yelled, pointing at Jamal in a sudden vicious display of self-preservation. He handled all the offshore routing. He set up the shell companies. I am just the visionary. I am just the face of M Capital. He managed the ledgers. Jamal's head snapped up, staring at his best friend in utter disbelief. You arrogant coward! Jamal spat, his voice trembling with sheer terror. You authorized every single illegal transfer to fund your luxury cars and Vanessa's designer shopping sprees. You signed the federal tax returns. That is enough, the lead agent commanded, stepping up to the edge of the stage. He completely ignored the pathetic infighting of the two ruined men. The agent turned his back on them and walked directly toward me. He pulled a thick, official-looking clipboard from beneath his tactical vest and flipped to the second page. He looked down at the document, then looked up, meeting my eyes with an expression of quiet, professional respect. Ma'am, the lead agent asked, his tone shifting from authoritative hostility to formal protocol. Are you the anonymous whistleblower who provided the forensic data on Mr. Washington's unlicensed securities trading and Mr. Vance's extensive wire fraud? I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply offered a single, concise nod. A collective gasp rippled through the remaining guests. Brenda, who was still slumped in a nearby chair, let out a high-pitched, wailing moan. She finally realized that the daughter-in-law she had relentlessly tormented and treated like absolute garbage had not just taken her retirement fund. She had meticulously legally handed her precious son over to the federal government on a silver platter. Richard stood frozen near the bar, his face the color of wet chalk, undoubtedly wondering if the SEC agents had also received the detailed receipts of his own staggering embezzlement history. Secure the suspects, the lead agent ordered, gesturing sharply toward the stage. Two agents grabbed Marcus, spinning him around roughly and slamming his hands behind his back. The heavy steel handcuffs clicked loudly into place, echoing through the ballroom. Marcus let out a pathetic, muffled sob as he was physically hauled off the stage, his custom leather shoes dragging across the marble floor. Another agent grabbed Jamal. The brilliant legal mastermind did not fight back. He offered his wrists willingly, his entire body shaking as the cold steel locked around his skin. As the agent turned him to march him down the center aisle, Jamal's eyes met mine. The arrogant, condescending smirk he had worn every single day of our acquaintance was completely gone. In its place was a look of absolute soul-crushing terror. You planned this from the exact second you walked into that dining room, didn't you? Jamal whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of his total destruction. You knew exactly what you were doing. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, leaning in close so only he could hear the final lethal truth. No, Jamal, I replied, my voice smooth and mercilessly cold. I planned it the exact second you snapped your fingers and told me to fetch the mistress a glass of water. The phone screen illuminated the dark interior of the town car, casting a harsh glow across my face. The caller ID flashed Marcus Vance, accompanied by an active FaceTime request. He must have somehow sweet-talked a rookie agent into letting him make one single phone call before confiscating his devices, or perhaps he simply begged like a dog. I swiped the green accept icon, leaning back into the plush leather seat as his face filled my screen. Marcus was completely unrecognizable from the polished, arrogant CEO who had been standing on stage just 20 minutes ago. He was crammed into the back of a federal squad car, his face illuminated by the relentless flashing of red and blue emergency lights cutting through the darkness. His custom velvet tuxedo jacket was gone. His crisp white shirt was torn at the collar, and his perfect hair hung in sweaty, disheveled clumps across his forehead. He was weeping hysterically, thick tears streaming down his face as he stared into the camera. Maya. I am sorry, Marcus sobbed, his voice pitching upward in pure, unadulterated panic. Please, I am begging you. Vanessa meant absolutely nothing to me. She was just a distraction. And my parents, they pushed me into this. They hated how independent you were, and Richard needed cash to cover his debts. They forced me to lock you out of the company. You have to believe me. Please give the money back to the feds. Tell them it was a massive misunderstanding. Tell them Jamal made a mistake. We can fix this. The sheer cowardice of his rapid betrayal was staggering. Within 10 minutes of being arrested, he had eagerly thrown his mistress, his business partner, and his own parents directly under the bus to save his own skin. He had absolutely zero loyalty to anyone but himself. I propped my phone up against the leather armrest, keeping Marcus directly in frame. I calmly opened my designer clutch and pulled out a tube of deep crimson lipstick. Using the FaceTime video feed on the screen as a mirror, I slowly and meticulously reapplied my lipstick, making sure the edges were absolutely flawless. I ignored Marcus as he continued to blubber and beg on the other end of the line. You told me just last month that you wanted a traditional family, Marcus. I said, my voice smooth, casual, and completely devoid of any sympathy. You told me I was too cold, too focused on my career, and too broken to give you the legacy you deserved. You wanted a wife who would stay quiet, and parents who would worship your success. I snapped the lipstick cap shut and picked the phone back up, bringing my face close to the lens. Now you have exactly what you wanted. A real traditional family. You and your parents and Jamal can all bond over your shared values. You can all share a cell block in federal prison. Maya, please, Marcus shrieked, slamming his cuffed hands against the reinforced plastic divider of the squad car. You cannot do this to me. I am the founder of M Capital. You are a mascot who could not even code a basic landing page, I corrected him sharply. Before Marcus could unleash another pathetic excuse, a sudden burst of frantic movement in the background of the video feed caught my attention. Through the thick, reinforced window of the squad car behind Marcus, I could clearly see the illuminated entrance of the country club. Vanessa was standing on the pristine concrete driveway, her silver silk maternity gown completely soaked from the spilled champagne. She was arguing viciously with one of the federal agents, gesturing wildly toward the fleet of impounded luxury vehicles. Even through the digital compression of the phone screen, I could read the absolute horror and disgust washing over her face as the agent officially informed her that every single asset Marcus claimed to own was being seized. The lavish lifestyle she had been promised was nothing but a mirage. Watch closely, Marcus. I instructed, pointing my manicured finger at the screen. Take a good look over your left shoulder. Marcus clumsily twisted his body in the cramped back seat, pressing his face against the glass to look outside. He watched in agonizing high definition as Vanessa stopped arguing with the federal agent. She looked directly at the squad car holding Marcus, her face twisted in pure contempt. She reached down, grabbed her left hand, and violently yanked the massive 5-carat diamond engagement ring off her finger. She drew her arm back and hurled the heavy piece of jewelry directly at the police cruiser. The diamond hit the reinforced glass inches from Marcus's face with a sharp, audible crack before bouncing off into the dark landscaping. Vanessa, Marcus screamed, completely forgetting about me as he battered his head against the window. Vanessa, wait. But Vanessa was already moving. Without a single backward glance, she spun around and intercepted an older, heavy-set venture capitalist who had just sprinted out of the ballroom doors to escape the raid. He was a notorious billionaire, known for his string of young, ambitious wives. Vanessa seamlessly linked her arm through his, pressing herself against his side, and began sobbing a fabricated story of how she had been deceived and terrified by Marcus's sudden criminal behavior. The older man patted her hand consolingly, immediately guiding her toward his waiting unimpounded limousine. She was gone. The ultimate prize Marcus had destroyed our marriage for had seamlessly pivoted to her next wealthy target in less than 15 minutes. Marcus collapsed back against the plastic seat, his mouth hanging open in silent, shattered disbelief. The illusion of his irresistible charm and power was entirely dead. He had absolutely nothing left. No money, no company, no family, and no future. I did not offer him any closing remarks. I did not give him the satisfaction of a final dramatic goodbye. I simply pressed the red button on my screen, severing the connection, and plunging the town car back into peaceful, luxurious silence. I leaned my head back against the soft leather headrest and closed my eyes, letting the gentle hum of the engine soothe the final traces of adrenaline out of my system. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows in streaks of gold and silver. The suffocating weight I had carried for the past 3 years, the constant gaslighting, the emotional manipulation, the brutal financial theft, was completely gone. I had surgically excised the cancer from my life. The heavy town car eventually slowed, turning off the chaotic main highway and gliding smoothly down a private, secluded access road. We bypassed the crowded commercial terminals, entirely pulling up to a highly secure, pristine glass building reserved strictly for elite international travel. "We have arrived at the JFK Private Aviation Terminal, ma'am," the driver announced quietly, stepping out to open my door. I stepped out into the crisp, cool night air. A uniformed concierge was already walking toward me with a luggage cart, ready to escort me directly to the waiting first-class cabin. I reached back into the vehicle and firmly grabbed the handle of my sleek black titanium briefcase. Inside that reinforced shell sat 3 heavily encrypted solid-state hard drives containing the complete, untraceable sum of my newly secured fortune. I adjusted the strap of my gown, squared my shoulders, and walked confidently through the glass doors, leaving Marcus, his entire fraudulent family, and the wreckage of my old life permanently behind me. I settled into a plush leather armchair facing a massive flat-screen television mounted above a sleek marble fireplace. The muted news broadcast running on the screen suddenly switched from international market updates to a breaking local bulletin. A bold, glaring red ticker crawled rapidly across the bottom of the screen. Local investment firm exposed as massive family fraud ring. Helicopter footage filled the high-definition monitor, showing the prestigious country club totally surrounded by a sea of flashing federal emergency lights. A stern-looking anchor described the unprecedented SEC and IRS raid on M. Capital, detailing the immediate, highly public arrest of the firm's founder and chief legal counsel. The camera panned over the fleet of seized luxury vehicles being loaded onto flatbed tow trucks. The media was already aggressively dismantling the brilliant, flawless facade Marcus had spent years carefully constructing. I watched aerial shots of Marcus being forced down the grand staircase of the club, in handcuffs, his velvet tuxedo looking pathetic under the harsh glare of the security floodlights. I flagged down a passing attendant and ordered a simple black coffee. As I waited in the quiet luxury of the lounge, my eyes remained locked on the screen. The profound satisfaction that bloomed in my chest was intoxicating, warming me from the inside out. I remembered the grueling, endless nights I had spent locked in the cramped spare bedroom of our first apartment, my fingers flying across a glowing keyboard until my vision literally blurred and my joints ached. I had meticulously authored every single line of the complex proprietary algorithmic code that built M Capital. I had constructed the entire predictive trading model completely from scratch, solving massive mathematical routing problems that Marcus and Jamal could not even begin to comprehend. And while I was burning my retinas and surviving on lukewarm caffeine to build our wealth, Marcus was out playing 18 holes of golf at the country club, schmoozing wealthy investors with the brilliant software he had absolutely no hand in creating. I remembered Brenda barging into my home office without knocking, her nose wrinkled in utter disgust as she surveyed my cluttered desk and tired eyes. She would stand there in her expensive pearls, sipping champagne paid for by my exhaustion, constantly reminding me that Marcus was out building a massive empire while I sat around in sweatpants, not contributing enough to their elevated lifestyle. "You are holding him back, Maya," Brenda would sigh, dripping with condescension. A man of his stature needs a wife who hosts galas and builds connections, not one who hides behind a computer screen all day. The attendant returned silently, placing a delicate porcelain cup and saucer on the table beside me. I picked it up, inhaling the rich, dark aroma of the roast, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The dark, bitter liquid tasted incredibly sweet today. My quiet victory lap was abruptly interrupted. Heavy, frantic footsteps echoed sharply across the polished lounge floor, completely disrupting the serene, exclusive atmosphere. The hostess tried to step in the way, but a man in a rumpled, expensive gray suit shoved right past her. He came sprinting toward my seating area, his silk tie askew, and his chest heaving with intense exertion. He clutched a thick leather briefcase to his chest like a protective shield. I recognized him instantly. It was David, the senior managing partner at the prestigious corporate law firm where Jamal was employed. Jamal had heavily leveraged their immaculate corporate reputation to legitimize Marcus's fraudulent shell companies. David stopped directly in front of me, gasping for air, his face pale and slick with panicked sweat. "Maya Vance." He panted, his voice a harsh, desperate whisper as he stared down at me. "You are not getting on any plane tonight." I stood up slowly, maintaining my perfect posture, and smoothed the heavy silk skirt of my gown. "My last name is no longer Vance David." I corrected him, my tone perfectly even and unbothered. "And unless you are my pilot, you absolutely do not dictate my travel schedule." David's eyes narrowed into a furious, panicked glare. He slammed his heavy briefcase onto the marble coffee table, rattling my porcelain cup. "Jamal just used his one phone call from Federal Holding to contact the firm." David sneered, jabbing a shaking finger directly at me. "We know exactly what you did. You orchestrated a hostile takeover of a corporate entity using falsified digital asset transfers. I have a federal judge on standby right now. I am filing an emergency injunction to completely freeze your passport, ground your flight, and seize every single hard drive in your possession. You are a flight risk and a cyber criminal. You are not leaving this country with M Capital's money." I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I calmly reached into the side pocket of my titanium briefcase and pulled out a thin, unmarked manila folder. I had fully anticipated Jamal would try to weaponize his powerful firm the second he realized he was trapped in a federal cage. I held the folder out toward the furious senior partner. "File your injunction, David," I stated, my voice dropping to a lethal quiet register. "Go ahead and call your judge. But before you make that monumental mistake, you might want to read page 2 of this secondary file." David hesitated, his arrogant bluster faltering slightly under my unwavering, ice-cold gaze. He snatched the folder roughly from my hand and flipped it open. I watched his eyes scan the dense, highlighted financial data on the second page. That document details the exact routing numbers Jamal used to establish M Capital 2 years ago. I explained, my words slicing clearly through the quiet lounge. It shows exactly where Jamal unlawfully diverted $750,000 directly from your firm's heavily regulated client escrow account to cover Marcus's initial trading margins. He did not just steal from his clients, David. He used your firm's primary operating license to shield the transactions. The SEC is not just looking at M Capital right now. By tomorrow morning, they will be raiding your corner office. The color completely drained from David's face, leaving him a sickening ashen gray. His jaw went slack as the catastrophic reality of Jamal's hidden actions registered in his brain. The heavy leather briefcase slipped from his trembling hands and crashed onto the marble floor. I simply tapped the block contact button on my screen, permanently deleting Vanessa's pathetic extortion attempt and erasing her from my digital existence forever. I placed my phone face down on the polished walnut side table and opened my laptop. There was one final critical loose end to tie up before I left American airspace permanently. Marcus had spent the last 3 years aggressively leveraging several massive personal lines of credit to fund his extravagant lifestyle. He had hidden these astronomical debts under the umbrella of a shadow limited liability company I had formed early in our marriage for tax purposes. Because Marcus possessed absolutely zero understanding of corporate legal structures, he blindly assumed the corporate veil would shield his personal assets forever. He was wrong. I accessed the offshore corporate registry portal, my fingers flying across the illuminated keyboard with practiced precision. I bypassed the standard security protocols using my master administrative override. The screen displayed the LLC holding his millions in unsecured debt. With exactly 3 deliberate keystrokes, I initiated the irrevocable dissolution protocol. A confirmation prompt flashed on the screen in stark white text. I pressed enter. The digital severance was instantaneous and brutal. The corporate shield vanished into the digital ether. The automated banking systems immediately recognized the sudden dissolution of the holding company. Without human intervention, the algorithms aggressively reassigned over $4 million of high-interest toxic debt directly to Marcus's personal Social Security number. I took a slow, satisfying sip of my vintage champagne, relishing the crisp bubbles as the massive aircraft began its steep ascent. Miles below my rising flight path, the horrific reality of Marcus's new life was setting in. While I was reclining my seat into a plush bed and adjusting my cashmere blanket, Marcus was being completely stripped of his dignity. In a sterile, freezing holding cell at the Federal Detention Center, an indifferent corrections officer was forcing him to peel off the remains of his custom velvet tuxedo. His confiscated phone sitting in an evidence locker down the hall was undoubtedly vibrating endlessly with a barrage of automated financial alerts. His pristine credit score was free-falling to absolute zero in real time. He was sitting on a cold metal bench, under harsh fluorescent lights, finally realizing the ultimate truth. M Capital was never a tech unicorn. It was a hollow shell. Without my proprietary code, his entire startup was nothing but vaporware. The golden boy of the financial district was officially bankrupt both morally and economically. I closed my laptop, the quiet hum of the jet engines serving as a soothing lullaby. For the first time in 7 long, grueling years, I slept deeply. I slept without the suffocating weight of my toxic husband, or his parasitic family dragging me down into their abyss of debt and deceit. The gentle chime of the cabin intercom woke me hours later. Through the rounded window of my pod, the snow-capped peaks of the Swiss Alps cut through the crisp morning sky. Zurich Airport was pristine, a marvel of quiet efficiency that perfectly matched my new state of mind. I bypassed the crowded commercial customs lines entirely. A discreet concierge escorted me through a private diplomatic channel, stamping my newly minted passport. The name printed inside no longer carried the tainted Vance legacy. I had legally restored my maiden name weeks ago, wrapping my new identity in layers of unassailable corporate privacy protections. I stepped out into the crisp, biting European air. A sharply dressed man with silver hair and an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stood beside a gleaming black Bentley. Klaus, my Swiss wealth manager, offered a respectful formal bow as I approached. He held a discreet tablet bearing my newly restored name. "Welcome to Zurich!" Madame Klaus greeted me, his voice a low, soothing baritone. He seamlessly took my titanium briefcase and ushered me into the heated leather interior of the luxury vehicle. "I have excellent news. The final offshore transfers have all cleared our highest security protocols. Every single cent of your relocated capital is now fully integrated into your new trusts." I nodded, pouring myself a glass of sparkling water from the car's built-in console. "And the SEC investigation." Klaus allowed himself a rare, razor-thin smile. "Executed flawlessly, exactly according to your legal blueprints. The SEC has officially classified you as a cooperating victim of Mr. Vance's fraud. Your proactive disclosure of their illegal wire transfers granted you absolute federal immunity." I looked out the tinted window as we glided smoothly toward the financial district. The perfect poetic irony of the situation settled over me like a warm, protective cloak. For 3 agonizing years, Jamal Washington had used his brilliant Ivy League legal mind to construct a labyrinth of shell companies designed to trap me. He had orchestrated the aggressive post-nuptial agreement, the complex corporate structuring, and the offshore routing specifically to ensure that if the company ever went under, or if Marcus ever left me, I would be left completely destitute. But Jamal had made one fatal miscalculation. He severely underestimated the woman who actually built the machine he was trying to steal. I had simply taken his intricate malicious legal framework and reverse-engineered it. I used the exact same system Jamal designed to ruin me to immunize myself completely. By exposing their unlicensed securities trading, while quietly isolating my proprietary code and hard-earned assets, I had forced the federal government to legally recognize me as a victim of their financial abuse. The forensic trails I established clearly proved the in-laws' money was a voluntary business dissolution payout. I was completely exonerated on paper, legally recognized as a victim, yet I was financially a multimillionaire, with $12.5 million sitting safely in Zurich. The Bentley pulled up to a discreet, unmarked stone building in the heart of Paradeplatz. There were no flashing signs, no glass lobbies, just solid, centuries-old architecture that radiated absolute, impenetrable security. Klaus led me past a pair of armed, silent guards and down a private elevator into the subterranean vaults. We entered a climate-controlled steel room. A bank officer, moving with practiced discretion, unlocked a heavy titanium safety deposit box and slid the long metal drawer onto a velvet-lined table. I opened my sleek titanium briefcase and pulled out the 3 heavily encrypted hardware wallets I had carried across the Atlantic. These small, unassuming black devices held the vast, untraceable sum of my liquidated crypto assets. I placed the hardware wallets into the cold steel drawer. The bank officer slid the drawer back into the reinforced wall and turned the dual keys, handing one heavy brass key to me. As my fingers closed around the cold metal, a profound sense of peace finally washed over my entire body. The tangible weight of my security was finally real. It was no longer a stressful series of numbers on a glowing screen or a desperate late-night coding session. It was solid, physical, and absolutely untouchable. I had won. We walked back to the waiting Bentley in a comfortable, victorious silence. I settled into the back seat, ready to head to the luxury penthouse Klaus had secured for my first month in the city. Before the driver could put the car in gear, Klaus reached into his leather portfolio and pulled out a slim, encrypted tablet. "I thought you might enjoy the morning financial briefings from the United States," Madame Klaus said, handing me the device. "It seems your former associates are experiencing a rather catastrophic morning." I took the tablet and tapped the screen. The financial news sites were completely dominated by the M Capital raid, but the headline article was not about Marcus, it was about Jamal. I zoomed in on the bold text, my eyes scanning the breaking news alert. Tiffany, my former sister-in-law, and Jamal's notoriously ruthless, status-obsessed wife had not wasted a single second. Realizing that the federal government was seizing all of Jamal's assets, and that her husband was facing decades behind bars, she had immediately turned on him. The article confirmed that Tiffany had officially filed for an expedited divorce at 9 in the morning, but she had not stopped there. To save herself from being implicated in his offshore tax evasion and the massive family fraud ring, Tiffany was actively cooperating with federal prosecutors. She had handed over Jamal's personal laptops and a hidden ledger of his illicit client transactions to secure her own immunity. She was throwing her own husband to the federal wolves to save her country club membership. I stared at the screen, absorbing the absolute collapse of the people who had tried to destroy me as the Bentley pulled smoothly into the Swiss traffic. I watched the digital ink dry on the screen, a profound sense of closure washing over me. Over the next several weeks, my mornings in Zurich settled into a quiet, luxurious routine. I would sit on the expansive balcony of my penthouse overlooking Lake Zurich, sipping rich espresso and scrolling through the unsealed court transcripts trickling out of the United States federal docket. The implosion of the Vance Empire was not just swift, it was a spectacular, bloodthirsty cannibalization. The moment federal prosecutors placed Marcus and Jamal in separate interrogation rooms, The arrogant solidarity they had paraded around the country club completely evaporated. The pristine corporate lawyers were suddenly fighting like cornered rats in a sinking ship. Jamal struck first. Desperate to save his own skin and protect whatever scraps of his legal career remained, he filed a motion throwing his brother-in-law entirely under the bus. Jamal's defense strategy claimed he was merely a naive legal consultant. He testified under oath that Marcus had unilaterally orchestrated the shell companies forge the digital signatures and deliberately deceived the law firm about the origin of the capital. Jamal thought he was the smartest man in the room, but he severely underestimated the sheer spiteful vindictiveness of a narcissist who had just lost everything. Marcus retaliated with explosive scorched earth hostility. Realizing he was facing decades in federal prison, Marcus directed his court-appointed public defender to hand the Securities and Exchange Commission a hidden cache of physical flash drives. These drives contained the undeniable proof of Jamal's massive offshore gambling debts. Marcus laid out exactly how Jamal had meticulously embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from his firm's secure client escrow accounts to cover his catastrophic losses at underground international casinos. The mutual destruction was absolute. By turning on each other, they handed the prosecution an airtight, devastating case against both of them. The blast radius of their federal indictments did not stop at the edge of the courtroom. The IRS Asset Forfeiture Division moved with ruthless mechanical precision. Because Brenda and Richard had willingly accepted millions of dollars in stolen funds to finance their elevated social status, their entire manufactured lifestyle was abruptly seized. I read the local society pages with deep amusement as the journalists detailed the humiliating eviction of the Vance patriarchs. Their sprawling, immaculate estate bordering the 18th hole of the country club was padlocked and cordoned off with yellow federal tape. The luxury vehicles, the imported antiques, the country club memberships, all of it vanished overnight. They were violently ripped from the apex of high society and dropped onto the concrete reality of the bottom rung. Brenda and Richard were forced to move into a tiny, cramped ground-floor apartment on the absolute worst side of town. The property backed up to a noisy, elevated train line, rattling the thin, uninsulated windows every 15 minutes. I could easily picture Brenda sitting in a stained, sagging recliner that smelled of stale cigarettes, staring at peeling linoleum floors. But the ultimate poetic justice was Brenda's new employment status. With Richard's accounts frozen and his reputation utterly radioactive, the bank refused to extend them a single cent of credit. For the first time in her pampered, privileged life, Brenda had to get a job to survive. A former colleague of mine still working in the city discreetly texted me a covert photograph. It showed Brenda standing at the entrance of a massive discount retail store. She was wearing a cheap synthetic blue uniform vest over a faded blouse. The woman who had ruthlessly mocked the working class, who had looked down her surgically altered nose at anyone without a trust fund, was now forced to stand on her aching feet for 8 hours a day, handing out plastic shopping carts and greeting bargain hunters with a mandatory plastic smile. Vanessa's descent was equally steep and entirely self-inflicted. Her desperate extortion attempt had failed spectacularly, and her illusion of bagging a wealthy tech titan evaporated the moment the federal agents kicked down the door of the luxury condo she thought she owned. The property naturally belonged to the seized LLC. She was given exactly 2 hours to pack her belongings into garbage bags before being locked out. Without Marcus's stolen credit cards to fund her high-end lifestyle, Vanessa had absolutely nowhere to go. She was forced to swallow her pride and move back into her childhood bedroom at her parents' modest, crowded house. The local gossip blogs enthusiastically documented her tragic return. She was heavily pregnant, her designer wardrobe replaced by cheap maternity wear, completely abandoned by the brilliant millionaire she thought she had successfully stolen. She was trapped in a suffocating suburban nightmare entirely dependent on her parents facing the terrifying reality of raising a child whose father was a broke, disgraced felon facing 20 years in a maximum security penitentiary. I closed my tablet, taking a deep breath of the crisp alpine air. The toxic, suffocating weight of the Vance family was truly gone. They were entirely consumed by the fires they had ignited. Later that afternoon, I opened my secure laptop to review my automated digital correspondence. Before leaving the States, I had set up a heavily encrypted anonymous mail forwarding portal tied to my old corporate P.O. box, strictly to monitor any lingering legal notices. A new notification blinked on the screen. It was a high-resolution scanned image of a piece of physical mail. I clicked the file and a piece of lined yellow legal paper filled the screen. The handwriting was frantic, sloppy, and instantly recognizable. It was a letter from Marcus mailed directly from the Federal Detention Center. I skimmed the desperate, pathetic scrawl. He was begging for forgiveness. He wrote paragraphs detailing how he was broken, terrified, and finally understood the magnitude of his mistakes. But true to his nature, he refused to take absolute responsibility. The second page was entirely dedicated to blaming Brenda and Richard. He claimed he was suffering from a lifelong addiction to his parents' approval, driven mad by their relentless pressure to maintain an impossible image of wealth. He wrote that if I could just find it in my heart to contact the prosecutors to explain that he was manipulated by his family and his lawyer, we could start over. He promised he would change. He promised he loved me. I stared at the frantic ink scratching across the yellow paper, a monument to a weak, cowardly man who still believed he could talk his way out of the consequences of his own actions. A sharp, genuine laugh erupted from my chest, breaking the immaculate silence of my newly acquired luxury chalet. The sound bounced off the vaulted timber ceilings and the floor-to-ceiling glass panes overlooking the snow-dusted peaks of the Swiss Alps. I did not even bother reading the final paragraph of the letter. The pathetic apologies and desperate pleas for salvation were as hollow as the man who had penned them. I placed my finger on the sleek trackpad, clicked the high-resolution scan of the yellow legal pad, and dragged the file directly into the digital trash bin. I selected the option to permanently empty the deleted items. The computer emitted a crisp, satisfying audio effect. Marcus Vance was officially eradicated from my digital ecosystem, leaving zero trace behind. I closed the laptop and stood up, walking toward the expansive balcony. The biting, pure mountain air filled my lungs. I possessed $12.5 million in untraceable secure cryptocurrency. I could have easily spent the rest of my days rotating between ski resorts, private beaches, and high-end boutiques. But passive luxury had never been my ultimate goal. My brain craved complex algorithms, digital architecture, and the thrill of outsmarting predators. Sitting idle felt too much like the life Brenda had always demanded I live. Within 2 weeks, I utilized my pristine new legal identity to lease a discreet, ultra-secure office space in the heart of Zurich. I bypassed the flashy glass high-rises and chose a heavily fortified, centuries-old stone building that radiated permanence and absolute discretion. I hired Klaus to manage the corporate registration for my new venture. I was no longer building predictive trading models for arrogant finance bros. I launched a boutique elite cybersecurity and forensic financial consultancy. My target demographic was highly specific and entirely unserved by the traditional male-dominated wealth management sector. I catered exclusively to high-net-worth women who suspected their husbands were exactly like Marcus and Jamal. These were intelligent, wealthy women who were slowly realizing that their charming, sophisticated spouses were secretly maneuvering to leave them financially destitute. I spent 18 hours a day coding a brand new suite of security software. I named the core defensive algorithm the Thanksgiving Protocol. The name was a private, bitter inside joke honoring the exact holiday night years ago when I first noticed the glaring discrepancies in our joint tax filings and felt that initial suffocating wave of cold panic. I swore no woman who walked through my heavy oak doors would ever have to experience that paralyzing terror again. The software was designed to act as a digital bloodhound. It tracked hidden asset transfers, identified covert shell companies, and instantly established impenetrable cryptographic vaults to legally sequester my clients' rightful capital before their predatory husbands even knew they were being investigated. Word of my specialized services spread rapidly through the hushed elite networks of European and American high society. Within 3 months, my firm was operating at maximum capacity, turning away more clients than we accepted. I sat across my polished mahogany desk from international heiresses, brilliant female surgeons, and self-made tech founders. They would arrive in my office trembling, clutching designer handbags filled with confusing bank statements and fragmented offshore routing numbers. A French shipping heiress sat across from me last Tuesday, her hands shaking so violently her diamond rings clattered against my desk. Her husband had quietly rerouted her ancestral dividends into a Cayman holding company. Within 45 minutes, my software had not only located the hidden capital, but had legally triggered an emergency repatriation protocol, freezing his access and securing her wealth behind an impenetrable multi-signature cryptographic wall. I watched women transform in front of my eyes. They walked in as terrified victims and walked out as empowered, financially untouchable fortresses. My business revenue exploded, multiplying my already substantial wealth entirely on my own terms. 6 months evaporated in a blur of coding consultations and immense profitability. I was sitting in my corner office, nursing a hot black coffee and watching the gentle snowfall dust the cobblestone streets below. My desktop monitor was split into 2 screens. The left side displayed the flawless execution of a massive asset protection transfer for a new client in London. The right side displayed a secure private live audio feed streaming directly from the federal courthouse in the Southern District of New York. Today was the highly anticipated sentencing hearing for the M Capital fraud ring. The audio feed crackled softly, bringing the tense, heavy atmosphere of the American courtroom directly into my quiet Swiss sanctuary. I could hear the frantic scratching of reporters' pens and the hushed, shocked murmurs of the gallery. Brenda and Richard were undoubtedly sitting in the back row, wearing cheap synthetic clothing they had purchased from the discount rack, watching their golden boy face the ultimate reckoning. The federal prosecutor had spent the last 2 hours mercilessly dismantling Marcus and Jamal. The 2 men who had once ruled the country club with absolute arrogance were now standing shoulder to shoulder in matching state-issued orange jumpsuits, their wrists and ankles bound in heavy steel chains. The federal judge's voice echoed through the speakers, dripping with absolute contempt. She did not hold back. She spent 15 grueling minutes verbally eviscerating their character, detailing their extreme greed, their blatant disregard for fiduciary duty, and the catastrophic financial ruin they had inflicted upon dozens of innocent, hardworking families. Marcus tried to read a prepared statement begging for leniency, citing his previous charitable contributions, but the judge silenced him mid-sentence. She declared their actions a premeditated assault on the integrity of the financial system. She read out the individual charges, confirming multiple counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and massive tax evasion. The tension through the audio feed was palpable as the judge reached the final conclusion. She announced the sentences without a shred of mercy or hesitation, handing down a punishment that guaranteed neither Marcus nor Jamal would breathe free air for the next 25 years. A sharp, loud crack echoed through my office speakers as the heavy wooden gavel struck the sounding block, signaling the absolute, irrevocable end of their miserable empire. The judge's voice, devoid of any sympathy, sliced through the stifling silence of the courtroom to deliver the precise mathematical equation of their ruin. For orchestrating a massive multi-million-dollar corporate fraud, wire fraud, and severe embezzlement, Marcus Vance was sentenced to 7 consecutive years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. There would be no early parole. There would be no weekend furloughs. He would serve every single day of those 84 agonizing months, locked in a concrete cell, stripped of the luxury and status he had sacrificed his own soul to acquire. Jamal Washington fared no better. For his direct role in facilitating the financial crimes, laundering the stolen capital, and grossly violating his fiduciary duties, the judge handed down a brutal 5-year federal sentence. But the true death blow for Jamal came moments later. The judge formally signed the order permanently revoking his legal license. He was officially and irrevocably barred from ever practicing law or holding any position within the financial sector for the rest of his natural life. His prestigious Ivy League degrees, the arrogant foundation of his entire identity, were instantly reduced to worthless scraps of paper. Through the live video feed, now broadcasting on the major news networks, I watched the immediate physical deflation of the two men. Marcus collapsed back into his heavy wooden chair, his face entirely drained of color. The arrogant, untouchable golden boy was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified shell of a man realizing his life was essentially over. Jamal buried his face in his shackled hands, his shoulders trembling violently under the bright fluorescent lights. The scene shifted abruptly as the news cameras scrambled out of the courtroom, racing to set up their heavy equipment on the wide concrete steps of the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. I leaned forward in my leather chair, watching the live feed with intense, unblinking focus. The heavy glass doors of the courthouse swung open. A pair of stern, heavily armed United States Marshals emerged, firmly gripping Marcus by his upper arms. He was shuffling forward awkwardly, his ankles bound by heavy steel chains that clanked loudly against the stone steps. The blinding barrage of camera flashes illuminated his state-issued orange jumpsuit. He looked exhausted, his hair unkempt, his eyes darting frantically around the aggressive mob of journalists. The press descended upon him like a pack of starving wolves. Microphones were thrust aggressively toward his face, nearly hitting his chin. Reporters shouted over one another, demanding statements about the missing millions and the total collapse of M Capital. But one voice, sharp and piercing, cut directly through the chaotic noise. A female reporter holding a bright red microphone shoved her way to the absolute front of the barricade. "Mr. Vance," she shouted, her voice echoing clearly through my computer speakers. "Do you have any words for your ex-wife, the woman whose proprietary software you stole and whose company you actively tried to destroy?" The question hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. The camera zoomed in close, capturing the exact devastating moment his spirit finally broke. There was no trademark smirk. There was no arrogant, rehearsed deflection. There was no smug denial. Stripped of his enablers, his stolen wealth, and his corporate shield, Marcus was left with absolutely nothing but the crushing weight of his own profound failure. He squeezed his eyes shut, his jaw trembling, and simply lowered his head in utter, suffocating shame. He stared at his chained feet, completely mute, as the marshals practically dragged him toward the waiting armored transport van. Jamal followed seconds later, doing everything in his power to hide his face behind his chained wrists, shrinking away from the blinding camera flashes as the crowd jeered. The heavy steel doors of the transport van slammed shut with a resounding metallic thud, sealing them inside their new, terrifying reality. I sat back in my chair, exhaling a long, slow breath. The suffocating, invisible weight I had carried on my shoulders for the past 7 years finally evaporated. The following weekend, I took the train south, leaving the bustling financial district of Zurich behind for the quiet, pristine elegance of Geneva. I needed physical distance to match the emotional distance I had just achieved. I sat at a small, wrought iron table at a sun-drenched lakeside cafe, sipping a flawlessly crafted cappuccino. The shimmering crystalline waters of Lake Geneva stretched out before me, reflecting the brilliant blue sky and the distant, majestic peak of Mont Blanc. I opened my sleek tablet one last time, clicking on a summarized news clip of the sentencing hearing. I watched Marcus lower his head in shame one final time. I felt no anger. I felt no lingering desire for revenge. I felt absolutely nothing for him. He was a stranger, a ghost from a past life that no longer had any bearing on my reality. The severance was complete. The past was finally unequivocally dead and buried. I swiped my finger across the screen, closing the browser tab forever. I locked the tablet, sliding it into my leather tote bag, and turned my face toward the warm European sun. "Excuse me, mademoiselle." The voice was low, melodic, and accented with a smooth, sophisticated Swiss charm. I opened my eyes and looked up. A tall man stood beside my table. He possessed warm, intelligent hazel eyes, an easy, genuine smile, and the rugged but refined look of someone who spent equal time outdoors and in a design studio. He was holding a leather-bound sketchbook overflowing with architectural blueprints. "I hope I am not intruding," he said, gesturing politely toward the empty chair opposite me. "The cafe is completely full. Is this seat taken?" For the first time in nearly a decade, my nervous system did not instantly flood with adrenaline. My defensive walls did not automatically raise. I looked at the man standing before me and did not see a hidden agenda, a potential predator, or a threat that needed to be managed and mitigated. I just saw a man with kind eyes and a polite smile. I saw the vibrant, bustling city around me. I saw a brilliant, unwritten future stretching out as far as the eye could see. No, I said, a genuine, radiant smile breaking across my face as I casually moved my handbag off the chair. It is completely free. Please sit down. He offered a gracious nod, sliding into the wrought iron chair opposite mine. He placed a thick, leather-bound portfolio on the table, careful not to encroach on my space. He introduced himself as Elias, a structural architect based in Lausanne. He was in Geneva to oversee the final restoration phases of a historic lakeside manor. We fell into a rhythm of conversation that felt entirely foreign to me. It was effortless. For 7 long years, my interactions with men had been strictly transactional, heavily guarded, or fiercely defensive. Marcus and Jamal communicated exclusively in aggressive monologues, constantly battling to assert dominance over every room they entered, casually dropping the names of venture capitalists and appellate judges like cheap currency. Elias was remarkably different. He did not boast about his wealth. He did not aggressively posture or attempt to steer the dialogue toward his own professional achievements. Instead, he asked me genuine questions about my transition to Switzerland and my impressions of the city. He listened to my answers with focused, unblinking attention, treating my words as if they carried actual weight. He opened his portfolio to show me a series of intricate hand-drawn blueprints. The textured parchment was covered in precise, elegant lines of charcoal ink. He explained the complex, delicate process of stabilizing a crumbling, centuries-old foundation without destroying the architectural integrity of the original structure above it. He pointed to a brilliant, cantilevered terrace designed to hover seamlessly over the water, explaining how the hidden load-bearing steel pylons would absorb the entire weight. I smiled, noting the profound poetic parallel to my own recent life. I told him I was in a similar business of building invisible fortresses, designing digital architecture meant to protect and preserve vulnerable assets from sudden collapse. He leaned in, his hazel eyes lighting up with sincere fascination, eager to understand the mechanics of my work without attempting to undermine it. As he spoke passionately about the critical importance of a resilient foundation, my mind involuntarily slipped backward. It was a fleeting, visceral flash of a life I no longer inhabited. I was abruptly transported back to that suffocating, freezing dining room in Manhattan on Thanksgiving night. The long mahogany table was set with heavy crystal and polished silver, gleaming under a harsh chandelier. Marcus sat at the head of the table, ignoring my existence entirely, while he poured expensive vintage wine for Jamal. Brenda sat to my left, her face tight with perpetual disapproval, inspecting my cooking, with thinly veiled disgust. And right across from me sat Vanessa, wearing a smug, predatory smirk, flaunting the diamond tennis bracelet Marcus had secretly purchased for her with my stolen capital. I vividly remembered the exact arrogant tone of Vanessa's voice when she loudly complained that her water glass was empty. I remembered the heavy silence that followed. I remembered Brenda slowly turning to me, snapping her manicured fingers in my face, and coldly instructing me to go into the kitchen and fetch the mistress a fresh bottle of imported sparkling water. I was not a wife or a respected professional in that room. I was a prop. I was an unpaid servant existing solely to absorb their collective coordinated disrespect while they brazenly spent my hard-earned money. The harsh, sterile memory evaporated the moment Elias gently called my name. He was asking if the brisk wind coming off the lake was making me cold. I blinked, the ghosts of Manhattan instantly fading into the bright, sunlit cafe in Geneva. I looked at the man sitting across from me. He was offering me his thick woolen scarf with a look of absolute fundamental respect. The contrast was staggering. I was sitting thousands of miles away from the toxic wasteland of the Vance family, breathing clean air, being treated with the utmost dignity and admiration by a man who viewed me as an absolute equal. A sharp, crisp chime echoed from my leather tote bag. It was the distinct notification tone I had assigned exclusively to my high-priority legal alerts. I excused myself politely and retrieved my phone. The screen illuminated with an automated Google alert pulling directly from the corporate registry of the New York State Department of State. The subject line was stark and beautifully definitive: M Capital Holdings, LLC, status update. I tapped the notification, my eyes scanning the brief block of legal text. The state had officially permanently dissolved the corporate entity. The hollow shell company that Jamal had maliciously engineered to trap me, the fake unicorn startup that Marcus had used to inflate his pathetic ego and fund his illicit affairs, was completely wiped from the public registry. It no longer existed in the eyes of the law, the government, or the financial sector. Every frozen asset had been liquidated. Every fraudulent contract was nullified. The last remaining tether tying my name to their criminal empire was legally severed. I locked the screen and placed the phone face down on the table. A deep, profound sense of invincibility settled into my bones. The nightmare was formally erased. I had not just escaped the sinking ship. I had meticulously engineered the torpedo that sent it to the bottom of the ocean, and I had sailed away in a luxury lifeboat funded entirely by their own arrogance. I was financially impenetrable. I was legally exonerated. I was truly completely untouchable. Elias watched me with the curious, warm smile, noting the undeniable shift in my posture. "Good news?" he asked, signaling the waiter for the check. I picked up my cappuccino, taking a slow, savoring sip. "The best news I have had in a decade," I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of fear. I looked across the table, no longer seeing a mark, a predator, or a threat to be managed. For the first time in my adult life, I saw a genuine new beginning. Sometimes the best reaction to disrespect isn't a screaming match. It's a calculated, silent exit that leaves them funding your future. I didn't just survive my in-laws' betrayal. I monetized it. Have you ever walked away and let a rock-solid contract do the talking? Tell me your story in the comments. Like and subscribe for more stories of sweet, undeniable revenge. The most profound lesson from Maya's journey is that the ultimate revenge against toxic betrayal is silent, calculated success. When faced with deep disrespect from those who should have protected her, Maya didn't waste her energy on screaming matches, petty arguments, or emotional pleas. Instead, she channeled her pain into pure strategy, meticulously engineering her own financial and emotional fortress. By walking away and letting undeniable legal and digital boundaries do the talking, she entirely stripped her abusers of their power and funded her brilliant future. True empowerment lies in securing your independence and refusing to remain a victim. Share your own stories of reclaiming your power in the comments below.